When I fall Hello.
Hello.
How are you? Good to see you guys. You all look beautiful. You all look very ready to praise God. And I just want to welcome you in God's house. You too, DJ.
Oh, thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Oh yeah, sorry, we're still welcoming you guys. So every night it's been just, hey guys, welcome, thank you for coming. How are you feeling? Good? It's okay not to feel so good, but you say good anyway. So we want to try to do something a little bit different with the welcome. So we want you guys to get involved as well. And not just saying hey back to us, I mean like saying welcome to each other. Now, I would like you all to rise and stand. And when I mean all, I mean people sitting in chairs. And so I want you all to look at each other and approach each other. Because tonight we are going to have a little contest. Who can come up with the best handshake?
Or best dance move.
There are two hats. So I recommend either find someone you don't know or find someone who's by themselves and make up a new handshake. That's all I ask of you.
There's a massive prize for you.
You get points to the edition of 2019
Are you guys on this?
Hey, you! What? You worry about yourself. You worry about yourself.
I'm not gonna get a prize. I'm watching you.
Ready? Let's go. Boom, under. Knee.
Okay, no fighting, boys, no fighting.
High five.
Just
Boom, get the handshake.
Oh,
You're trying to get a pro. I'll just do that. Don't believe in that.
Hey guys, all done?
Knee.
I mean, 16 years later, damn, come on.
What is later? Okay, ready, handshake?
my people, I ask that you be silent. If I could get everyone's attention once again, please. Alright, so seeing as there are many of you who have many pairs, I ask that you all take a seat right now. Now, I'd like to ask 3 pairs to come up here and display their handshakes, and we're
Only
gonna-
those who think they have the dopest.
the illest, the realest.
That's Pastor. Show them, Pastor. Show them. Who else? Only 2?
Two pairs?
It's okay, we know we're gonna win. We're being humble.
Alright, we need one more pair.
Man,
That's
come
us.
have a seat. These people looked on Google.
No, it wasn't Google.
It was Alright, we start with the words.
Doesn't count.
Oh, okay. Okay, you guys ready? I just want you to take a deep breath in because this might just blow your minds out. Ready? It's gonna start right. Ready?
Behold the
Boom!
angel.
Boom! 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 High five! Kill it! John! Yes! Touchdown!
Don't boo unless you're here. Anyway, let's go, baby. Let's go.
No, I insist. Age before beauty.
Oh my gosh.
I like this. This is gonna be.
I know. Just trying to trip, man. Hey.
Oh, we're sitting out and waiting, man.
Now, let's see you guys talk better. You gotta wish word first.
Don't do no backflips or nothing like that, you know. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I
You mean toothpicks?
Big hero, six. Original, completely original.
Okay, bye-bye. Alright, y'all, give it up for Ravi and Steve. The proudest. That's the ability. Alright, guys, let's hear it for Steve and Natalie. Alright, guys, let's hear it for Pasta and T. Yeah. You guys are Sal.
Mic drop.
Limited edition 2019 Tennessee Youth Hats. Congratulations.
It fits all hands. Alright, yo, thanks for participating.
That was just the welcome. We're moving on to the icebreaker right now. This time tonight, we have chocolates.
Very healthy, just not vegan.
Unfortunately, you won't be eating these for this activity. Because I didn't explain the activity. Okay, I'm getting to that right now. So if I could have a couple of young men or women to distribute these among you. Please, while I explain. Alright, so everyone will get 5 M&Ms each, or
Try to
different
get
colors.
different colors, yeah.
Yeah, try your best to get different colors. And you'll be holding these in your right hand.
Not eating them.
Not eating them. Please do not eat them. Everyone will be touching different M&Ms. So, when you're holding them in your right hand, your left hand will be free. And what will you do with your left hand? Well, everyone will stand up and walk around to people who have M&Ms. Everyone has 5, like I said they should.
Hey guys, listening? I'm sick. I'm tempted to do so.
Right, now that I have your attention once again, your left hand should not have any M&Ms in it. It should be empty. Whereas your right hand has M&Ms in it. So, you're all going to walk around to each other, and with your left hand, you're going to get in pairs and take one M&M out of that person's hand. And if that M&M is, say for example, red,
Still up on the board, y'all.
that person you took the M&M from has to talk about their favorite childhood memory.
What if I got my M&M in half?
And then they in turn take one from your right hand.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because you're holding it with your right hand. And then
Sean, you listening? I do. Listen.
I'm working.
Yeah, I'm making it.
Right. Did everyone understand that? Okay, so with your right hand, you're holding M&Ms. With your left, empty. You're going around to different people, taking an M&M out of their right hand.
Yes.
Depending on what color it is, you're going to ask them that question, and they will answer you politely. And now, you will have 5, which will eventually turn into 0 in your right hand. And once your right hand is empty, take a seat. And your left hand should have 5 M&Ms in it. In the end.
Anna, what are you eating there, girl?
Man, hold it, you know. I'm trying to talk.
This is
Pray
about
about it, pray about
time.
it, brother. You won't eat it, pray about it.
Alright, everyone stand. I want you all to mix and meet.
Alright, go find somebody they haven't spoken to in a while.
What up,
It's right there. Come on, guys, the instructions are there.
Yeah, for those of you who do not wish to eat your M&Ms, and just please do not eat them. They've been in everyone's hands. Put them in the bin.
Not mine. No, too late.
Well, don't sue me if you get sick.
Oh, you got all kinds of sweat in your mouth.
Yeah.
So once again, I would like to thank you all for your participation in the social experiment.
Alright, you guys. Now that I'm trying to get your attention, wifey. Alright, you guys. Did anybody find out something so cool or so good from someone else you didn't know?
Yes.
What was it, Ravi?
That, you guys have a weird dessert that I don't know how to describe it. Please describe it to me.
Okay, let me tell you something cool from somebody else that they're really actually glad they discovered.
Yeah, Izzy loves Pearl Harbor.
Thanks, Steve.
That's good. It's a good movie that's long, it has war, romance, and you keep engaged the whole entire movie.
Yeah.
And they're good looking.
Yeah.
That's twice, yeah.
Who said Wakanda? Who said Wakanda for a favorite movie? Like Black Panther?
It's Black Panther, dude.
Okay, Black Panther. Damn. Who said Black Panther for favorite movie? Okay, if you said yes, there was gonna be a prize for you, but it's okay. No.
I did.
No, you did not say. Alright, you guys. Thank you for participating, and you guys look like you're smiling now, and I'm very glad to see that. So can I please get Nathai to just bless us with a prayer, and then we're going with the program. Thank you, Nate. Alright, yo, if it's possible, get on your knees.
Loving Father in heaven, we thank you so much for the great week we've had this week already. Thank you for the fact that it's Thursday, which means it's Friday tomorrow, which is preparation day for your Sabbath. And just thank you for all the people that are meant to be coming from all over North Australia. Ask that you give them safe travelling mercies. Thank you, Lord, for the inspiration you're giving to our Pastor Eddie. Thank you so much for the great messages we're getting and for the personal journeys that we're all embarking on, and the fact that you're always with us. Thank you for hearing this prayer, and we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Alright, y'all. I want you guys to give a warm welcome to my ex-best friend, Mevo. She got something to share, yo.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Hi, T.
I got testimony, and these last couple of weeks have been pretty hard. After the floods, we got affected. Not as bad as some, so we're not complaining, but my sister and I, we ended up vacating our house, and at the time we were like, oh yeah, we could have had it worse. And then as time progressed, we were like, okay, so where are we going to stay? What are we going to do? And everybody opened their doors, and we were just like, well, let's put it in prayer. And then a friend of ours, shout out to Gemma, who got us onto L'Oreal, which offered us a place to stay until we could find something. And when we were applying for houses, we were like, okay, our first set of applications, we wrote down everything that happened, all our previous real estates and whatnot. And because we were vacated, but they didn't believe that we were affected enough, our real estate said, well, technically the house wasn't unlivable even though it was flooded. And so they said that we were break lease tenants, and we were behind by rent because we're supposed to be paying rent until the next tenants come in. So we went and got legal advice, and they said, don't worry about it, it'll go through mediation and QCAT and so forth. So that was a little bit of a shock to us, but when we did our applications, because we put our last real estate they when they went to call the real estate would tell them the truth, that from their perspective we were break lease tenants and we were really bad. So we got denied for a whole bunch of houses, and we were really discouraged, and we were like, we were discouraged because a lot of people after the floods decided that they were going to lie about in their applications, like little white lies, like who their previous tenants, previous landlords were, previous real estates were. And so, we won't lie, we were really tempted to lie in our applications, but we took it to prayer, we took it to God, and we said, you know what, if nothing comes up, we'll stay where we are. And then a week ago, a member from the city church sent us a text and said, hey, try this place. So we tried that place. I gave her a call and she didn't answer, so I sent her a text and I just said, hey, can we come and inspect the house? And she said, yeah, sure, come on down. So we went and looked at it, and then she said, but we need everything tied up and all the bond and everything paid by this date. And we still hadn't fixed the bond from the last place, and we were still trying to find our feet financially. And I sent her a text and I said, look, sorry, I really appreciate you taking us around the house, but we're just not going to be able to afford it by then. And then she sent a text and she said, well, I really like you girls, so just put in your application anyway. And I thought, this is my chance. This is my chance to lie. This is it. She likes me, so if I put some dodginess in the application, then she'll be like, okay, I'll call these people. And then that was weighing really heavy on my heart, and I took it to prayer, and I decided instead of lying, I'm going to tell the downright truth about everything. So I did like a 15-page application about everything that happened from the day the flood started to what we did, what we paid for, what we helped with, what we went through. And she gave me a call the next day and said, you know what, that's the most honest application I've ever seen in my life. And she started disclosing things about the property that she didn't need to, but she said to me she felt obligated to disclose things because I was so honest. And I thought, God is good. And then we told her about our struggle with trying to get the bond and trying to get the advance and stuff. And she turned around and she said, well, you know what, we'll just leave it up in the air for 2 weeks. We'll see how you go after 2 weeks, and then we'll contact you and we'll see how you're going. Just pay a little bit here and there, and she said, I really like you, and I think that I would rather have an honest tenant in there than someone who's good on paper and lies to my face. And so everything's still up in the air, everything's still left in prayer, but I think it was a real testimony to the fact that when you leave it in God's hands, that He will really pull through for you. Because I had everybody, all the youth going to different inspections for me. I called them up on different days to go and look at different places. And I said, we'll leave it all in God's hands. And when I was tempted to lie, and when I was tempted just to shortcut the system, you know, God impressed on my heart that tell the truth and I will find a place.
Amen.
So, yeah, praise God for that.
Can we get everyone upstanding for our opening song? It's Come As You Are.
So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart. Come as you are. There's hope for the homeless and all those who stray. Come sit at the table, come taste the grace. There's rest for the weary and rest that endures. Earth has no sorrows that heaven can cure. Earth has no sorrows that heaven can cure. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. Oh, who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart. Come as you are. So lay down your hurt. So lay down your hurt. So lay down your heart. Come as you are.
Thank you, Daisy.
I visited a masseur today named Nikki. Some of you know Nikki. She has a mantra. And the mantra is this: it will hurt, but it will work. It will hurt, but it will work. And she was telling the truth. This lady put hands on me. She put feet on me. She put elbows on me. She put a pesa and chisel, wooden chisel, on me. A hammer and a wooden chisel on me. She put the hammer on me. And then the hammer and the chisel again on me. She massaged my back by going through my stomach. She got through to my back muscles by going through my core. And I ain't never screamed out like that before. She made me stand up. She said, bend over. How far can you stretch? And I stretched down. And she said, stay there. And she got the hammer and chisel out and started again. Across my base and my back, down my legs, down the legs. She said, stand up, stretch. She could go down a little more. Oh, wait. And she started again. And then when she was finished, she said, how do you feel? I turned to my left. I turned to my right. And I bent down, pretty much touched the floor. Rotated, and rotated, and turned, and turned. And my body hurts, but it worked. I'm trying to convince her to move to New South Wales. I said, girl, there's a bright future ahead of you in Newcastle. God bless Townsville, man. I tell you. God bless Townsville. That ain't got nothing to do with what I wanted to say tonight. And I ain't even going to try and make it connect. I just wanted to share my day with you. The struggle was real. But we struggle towards purpose. You know, sometimes when people struggle or they're heading towards a struggle, and you know the struggle, as Steve knew my struggle, sometimes you just can't tell them everything. Because some things they just have to find out. They just have to find out. And that ain't got nothing to do with what I'm going to say tonight. But I thought I would put it in. You know, everything I know about God, I know because of my mother. I am the youngest of 10 children, 8 living. We lost one of my brothers, 2016. 2017, sorry. We lost him to cancer. 2016. We lost him to cancer. And I am the product of the grace of God and a praying mother. Everything I know about God, I know in retrospect. I think sometimes we struggle to, what am I learning about God and my experience with God and my journey with God. Sometimes the deepest lessons we learn from God, we just learn in the passing. We honestly learn in retrospect when we look at where we've been and we're like, oh wow, I didn't realize. And that's how we learn about God. Sometimes we're not actually learning about God in the moment. Faith believes in real time, but understands in retrospect. Faith acts in real time and understands in retrospect. I am grateful that the way in which my mother taught me God, she taught me by me looking at her book. And when I say her book, I'm talking about the book of her life. The Apostle Paul says our lives are epistles, known and read by everybody. My mother found Jesus when I was about 8 years old. My father had left. My father had left my mom after about 34 years of marriage. Left her with the last 5 children to raise on her own. It's 4 boys and 1 girl, and I'm the youngest. 5 of us to raise on her own. And I asked my mom when I was in my mid-30s, I said, Mom, why did you never get married again? My mom would threaten us with marriage sometimes. When we was younger and we was getting out of control in the house. She said, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find a hard-working Irishman and marry him and bring him in the house. I was like, no, not the Irishman, no. Not the hard-working, behave, Mom, don't behave. Not the hard-working Irishman. But I said, Mom, why did you never come? Because my mom's a good-looking woman. Beautiful black woman, good looking, spiritual, intelligent, you know what I mean? I look like my mom. That weren't a comedy slut. I look like my mom. How dare you? I actually do look like my mom. But people always laugh at me when I say that, you know what I mean? I don't know why. She said, Eddie, after your dad had left, it was nearly 30, it's 34 plus years of marriage, 10 children. She said, I was done. 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 And she said, Jesus met her. She didn't meet Jesus. We always get that wrong. Then I met Jesus. You were looking for Jesus? None of us are looking for Jesus. Genesis 1 told you that. None of us go looking for Jesus. Jesus comes looking for us. So Jesus met my mum because Jesus was looking for my mum. And when he met her, she made herself available to be met. And Jesus spoke to her out of the prophet Isaiah 44 and 45. And the prophet says, when your husband leaves you, Phyllis, I will be your husband. And I will be a father to your children, and I will take away the reproach from your name. And that was the promise he made to my mother, that he would be her husband, he would be our father, and he would protect her from the reproach and from the embarrassment and from the shame that people would heap upon her. And we joined the church. We joined the church in West London. Oh, it was a horrible church. Adventist church. Oh my gosh. It's a horrible church. And it was horrible because of the way they tried to make us feel. It was horrible because of the way they tried to make my mother feel. That my mother was this loose woman who had all these children. And now you're coming into the church, this single parent. You're coming into the church with all of these children. My mum was a wife whose husband had left her. She wasn't no wanton woman. But 10 of us, all by one set of parents. Not that it matters, but the way they was trying to make her feel and make us feel made me not want to be in this community. You know, and I only went because I had no choice. I was raised by a West Indian mother. You know what I mean? I remember when I was 10, I said, no, I'm the man in this house. I must have been on drugs, you know what I mean? Or come out of a dream in which I was on drugs, because I woke up like, nah, I ain't going to church this morning. It didn't work out. It didn't work out, man. You know what I mean? My mum got busy in the beating. All the way to church. Yeah, so I did, you know. So we just went to church. Everything I wanted to be, though, wasn't defined by church. Everything I wanted to be was defined by outside of church. And it's important that we understand that as young people, as people, we are always going to look for the thing that we want to define us. We're going to look for the people we want to define us. I wasn't raised in a house. I've never heard my mother swear. Never. Never heard my mother swear. I've never seen my mother cuss. I've never seen my mother drink. She had a life before she was a Christian. And she probably would have had a little baby sham or a little drink. But in this life, I've never seen any of the things. All of the things that I picked up outside of the church, outside of the community of faith, none of those things were things that I had seen my mother do. So within my house, I was being raised by my mother, Jesus, and this community of faith. And the reason why I say everything that I've learned about God, the thing that I've learned, and I've learned in retrospect about God, is that when God makes promises, he keeps promises. God doesn't say anything he cannot do. God doesn't, you know, some people like, you promise? Yeah, all right, then I promise. Don't say you promise. Like God is like, I'm not promising you nothing. I'm telling you I'm going to be your husband. What do you mean, do I promise? No, we don't pinky swear. I'm telling you, I'm going to be your husband. I'm going to be your father. I'm going to take away the reproach from your name. That's me. You don't need to ask me, oh, you promise, God, you promise. No, because that's how God works within the human story. And I told you, he's the one that comes looking for us. Genesis, you saw that. Genesis sets the picture for how God is always going to be operating in our lives. He's stepping into our life in order to rearrange and transform and renew the broken image and the broken relationship. And so, growing up, I grew up a kid who was grounded by prayer, grounded by values, grounded by that church community which took place in my house, grounded by my mother's influence, you know, and driven by everything outside. Everything outside of it. You know, I remember once going to my mum when I was younger, and I said, "Mum, can I have pocket money, please?" And my mum said, "What do you want pocket money for?" I said, "Because like kids, you know, they have pocket money, you know." I said, "Now, which kids have pocket money that you know?" I said, my white friends at school, they have pocket money, you know. She said, "Well, you better go and ask their parent to be your parent, because in this house, I ain't got no money to give you for pocket money. What do you think is going on here?" Serious. 10 years old. She said, "If you want pocket money, go get a job." 10 years old. Go get a paper round. Yeah, go get a paper round. So I went actually down to Earl's Court Market, round the corner, and I got a job that Sunday. And every Sunday for the next 3 years, I worked at Earl's Court Market. As from a very early age, I always had my own money. Always had my own money. So I can't understand why or where it was I started to get caught up in petty crime as a juvenile. What I do know though is that by the time I left primary school and was going into secondary school, by the time I left year 6, going into year 7, I was going into year 7 with about 14 juvenile convictions behind my name. The interesting thing was this: even though all of that was taking place in my life, God was still keeping his promise to my mom. You see, what we would do, we would look at that and say, well, how was God keeping his promise to your mom when you was getting all the way in trouble? How was God keeping his promise? You know, how was God being a good father to you when you was involved in all of this? Well, he was being a good father to me by always making sure that my life was balanced out. Because he knew that this child is going to make the choices he's going to make. He's going to make the choices he's going to make. But while he's making those choices, I'm going to show him my power in the midst of those choices. It was about year 9. And I was getting in trouble all the time in high school. Getting in trouble all the time. And I remember my mom sitting with me in front of an educational psychologist when I was in year 9. Year 8 going into year 9. And the educational psychologist said, "Mrs. Hippolyte, the problem with Eddie is that he is just uneducatable. He's uneducatable." Now you need to understand, when I went to high school in the 70s, because that's when I went into high school in the 70s, there were 2 groups of boys in London, in West London in particular, that was systematically weeded out of the educational system with that statement, uneducatable. Young, first-generation born black Caribbean boys like myself, British-born black Caribbeans like myself, and young white Irish boys. The Irish community was massive in West London. Young black British boys and young white Irish boys. We were weeded out of the educational system in England with that statement, uneducatable. So I lasted something like 4 or 5 weeks of year 9, and then I was permanently excluded from school. Just permanently excluded. Ended up in pupil referral units, then ended up in remand. And then from remand went into assessment. And then from assessment I was taken out of my home and I was placed in a community home school. And it was a school where you didn't get an education, you got a trade. You got a trade. How was God being faithful? In those years, in my teenage years, when I was getting into so much trouble, God would send my mother dreams That's how God speaks to my mom. God speaks to my mother directly through dreams. Like, directly through dreams. So a year before we got locked up and remanded, me and my brother, because he had turned that road with me as well. My brother who was older than me. I'm the baby. By the time we had turned that road, my mother would get dreams from God, and God showed my mother us being locked up a year before we got locked up. If these are the choices that they're making for this, let me show you the choices that they're making, and let me show you where it's going to end, so that when it happens, you're not going to be overwhelmed by it and thinking that I ain't in the bigger picture of what's happening with these boys. A year before, I remember once my mum said to my brother, you know, Simon, I dreamt that the police came here and knocked the door for you. She told him that on a Thursday. My brother stayed in all day Thursday, all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Monday, 7 o'clock in the morning, knock, 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 we have a warrant for Simon Hippolyte. That's how God acted and moved in our family. I remember once we were planning something. Oh my gosh. I can't believe we was actually even thinking about doing what we was doing. And the Lord showed my mum our conversation in her bed. In her bed. She got up and she came down into the room where we were. She said, I heard that you're planning on doing such and such. My brothers looked at me and I didn't say it wasn't. My brother was like, where did you hear that from, Mum? Don't worry about where I heard that from. Is it true? And when my mum is in that space, you just can't lie. It's like she looks through your soul. Like, yes, Mum. Yes, Mum. It's true. I told you on Monday, I told you on Sunday, I told you on Monday, I told you on Tuesday, I told you yesterday, and I'm telling you again today. God does not leave the mess of the human story. God stays engaged in the human story. Because if he leaves our story, what do we have? What do we have? And that's how God was showing his faithfulness. Showing his faithfulness to her, but also showing his faithfulness to me. I remember I was 17 years old. And I was just dissatisfied with my life. I thought about my life from 14. I'd looked at my life from the ripe old age of 14 to 17. And there were times I would just sit, just weeping. St. Augustine says that there's a God-shaped heart in every person. There's a God-shaped vacuum in every heart that can only be filled by the presence of God. But he got that from Solomon, who said he has placed eternity within us. He has placed eternity within us. And so my mom tricked me and my brothers into going and listening to a preacher. I'd spoken with my mom, told my mom about how I was feeling, and my mom said, well, just, you know, there's a preacher in town, go and hear him. You need to hear him, because my mom was going out to hear him just one night, you know. And my mom had the kind of wisdom. My mom knows when to say something and leave it there. And my mom knows when to insist that you should do this. And then my mom just knows when to flat out nag. And that's what she did with this one. We're all right. We're gonna go. All right, enough already, Mom. We'll go. And I remember it was a 2,000-seater tent, 3,000 seater. Well, actually, it was a 3,000-seater tent, and they had something like 5,000 at the weekend. Massive. We sat all the way at the back. Literally up against the canvas. My brother Simon sitting at my left, my best friend Lennox sitting at my right. And, you know, the preacher, he was like 6'7", 6'8", but he just looked small. But we didn't know that he doesn't preach to the first 15 rows. Because in the first 15 rows, it's just the saints, satisfied and sanctified, happy in Jesus, and he was waxing, I mean, he was preaching in the place. So, it's a Caribbean community, it's the African Caribbean community. And so, the African Caribbean tradition is an oral tradition. So it's a call and response tradition. You say something, we're going to respond to you. You say something we like, we're going to tell you we like it. You say something that is encouraging us, we're going to tell you to keep on encouraging us. It's biblical. It's biblical. And it's called. This man started to speak about God. Oh. He spoke about God. A God who knew us. He kept on using this term, a God who saves from the guttermost to the uttermost. Kept on saying that. A God who walks across human history with a heavy tread. A God who sent down his Son, and his Son loves us, and his Son knows us, and his Son has the power to forgive us and reclaim us and transform us. And the more this man spoke, the more I felt the eternity in me filling up. I just sat there conscious of this vacuum that was in me just filling. And then he made an appeal. And I remember turning to my brother Simon. I said, Simon, I want to go down. What do you reckon? He said, nah, man, it's not for me. It's not for me. I turned to my best friend Leonard. I said, Len, I want to go down. I want to go down. What do you reckon? He said, if you go down, I'll go down. And I don't even remember when I got up. If you've ever responded to an appeal, sometimes you don't remember getting up. It's just that because you're in that space with God and you're conscious when you've taken maybe the first 4 steps, then you realize, oh my gosh, I'm responding. My mother is partially blind. And so she never saw when I got up. Her friends saw for her. So they must have nudged her and said, Sister Hippolyte, Eddie got up. Remember it like it was yesterday, way over my left shoulder to the back of the tent in that direction. I heard, hallelujah, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. And I remember walking down the aisle thinking, this woman tricked me. This woman knew this was going to, I was there like that. This woman tricked me, man. And I got saved. I got saved at 17 and I got baptized at 17. And it was a time in which I understood God in a beautiful way. I was with a group of people. And the group was called Revive and Stay Alive. Revive and Stay Alive. And that was the name of a youth revival that we had in London. The first time young people had ever run a London-wide youth revival, and I was a part of it. And the group stayed together, and the group became known as Revive and Stay Alive. And we would travel up and down the south of England, up and down London, just preaching the gospel, encouraging young people, teaching them how to give Bible studies. Then it wasn't called small groups, then it was called cottage meetings. And encouraging them to have cottage meetings in their homes and for 2 years. But like I said the other night, stuff from my life started to creep back in. And I thought that being busy for Jesus, was the answer. I didn't have anyone to tell me no, Eddie, those are just your spiritual growing pains. Stay in there. And when the Spirit is seeking to grow you, don't fight him. Just stay in there. You'll grow. That stuff that's coming back, you'll grow. Stay in there. Make your mistakes. Stay where you are. Make your mistakes. You're good. Don't leave and struggle. Stay in there. Stay in this and struggle. And 19, I ended up leaving. If you don't decide who you're going to be as a teenager, you're going to be that person in your 20s with a vengeance. And everything I was before I joined Christ in my teens, I was in my 20s with a vengeance. And then Jesus met me again at 25. And at 25, he brought back everything that I remembered about him. That I remembered about him. Jesus has only got one currency with which he trades in the reality of evil, and that currency is love. He's only got one currency, and he has to trade with the currency of love in the reality of evil. But he trades good with the currency, because he trades the currency in a way that reminds us of our value in him. And that's what he did. He reminded me of my value in him. He reminded me of the journeys that I had taken. He reminded me that he was with me. I call those 5 years that I was gone my dark years. Let me show you how God worked with my mom. I couldn't leave the church when my mom was there, because I just didn't know how to explain it to her. 1985 is when I left. My mother had gone to Jamaica with a friend of hers. Our family is from the tiny island of Grenada, but her best friend comes from the island of Jamaica. So she went to Jamaica with her friend, and while they were in Jamaica, I took her. Actually, her flight was a Sabbath flight. She had a Saturday flight. So I took her to the airport, and I stopped going to church that Sabbath. And she was away for the whole of February. So I had a whole month that I didn't have to explain myself to my mum. Meanwhile, in Jamaica, my mum is sleeping. And the dreams that she dreams that night are these dreams. Eddie's standing up in the church and he's preaching, and the church is packed. The church is packed and people have come from everywhere. And Eddie's just preaching the word with power and conviction. And the church is shouting amen. And the church is shouting hallelujah. And the church is shouting thank you, Jesus. And she said, I was preaching, and all of a sudden she noticed that I was being distracted. I was being distracted by something at the back of the church. And the more I was being distracted, the quieter my voice got. The quieter my voice got was the more I was looking at what was at the back of the church. And the more I was looking at what was at the back of the church was the quieter that my voice got. And then she turned, because she wanted to know what was distracting me from preaching the word. And she said she turned, and when she looked, she saw this dark black figure with a small head walking down the aisle. She said she turned and she shouted at the front of the church, Eddie, don't look! It's the devil, Eddie, don't look, don't look, don't look! And she said the closer he got, the quieter I got, until I just stopped preaching. And he walked up on the platform and he walked behind me. She said I turned and I looked at him, and he walked up the platform and I walked up the platform with him. And she woke up screaming, Ennis, her friend. Eddie's in trouble, Eddie's in trouble, we have to pray, Eddie's in trouble, Eddie's in trouble. And I was gone that whole month. And when she got back, took her bags, took her into her room, and she said, sit down. She said, you stopped going to church, innit? I said, how did you know? She said, the Lord showed me in Jamaica. You stopped going to church? I was like, yeah, Mom, She couldn't find me because I was already gone. She had seen from the dream, I was already gone. So she started to pray, Lord, bring Eddie back to church, bring Eddie back to church, bring Eddie back to church. Bring Eddie back to church. You know, the last time I preached that sermon that she saw, I remember the place I preached it. I preached it in a church called Edmonton Church in North London. And the sermon that I preached was, while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. That was my last sermon I ever preached. And I made an appeal, and people came up, closed the Bible, and then I was done. And my mom would pray the prayer, Lord, bring Eddie back to church, bring Eddie back to church. And then the Lord said, Phyllis, you have to stop praying that prayer and pray this prayer. And when she looked at the prayer, she didn't go like, no, Lord, just bring Eddie back to church, bring Eddie back to church. He said, Phyllis, I told you, you need to stop praying that prayer and pray this prayer. And she looked again and she was like, And I asked her, Mom, what was the prayer? The Lord was saying to her, you need to pray this prayer, Phyllis. Lord, anyhow you're going to save Eddie, just save him. And she said she didn't want to pray that prayer. Because that prayer took the end control out of her hands. She didn't have control over that prayer. Lord, bring Eddie back to church. She's got control over that prayer. But save him any way you're going to save him. She said she didn't have control over that prayer. And sometimes God is going to ask you to pray prayers that you have a semblance of control over how it's answered. And then there are times when God is going to ask you to pray prayers that you have no control over the answer. But all you can do is trust him. And Chelsea trusted it. She trusted it. And she prayed the prayer. I said, Mama, did you pray that prayer? You know when my mom prayed that prayer? My mom prayed that prayer around the beginning of 1986. 1986. She prayed that prayer around the beginning of 1986. I was like, that made sense. Because the moment my mom trusted her husband to be our father and trust him with their children, when she prayed that prayer, our crew was a very small crew, and it actually consisted of family. Our crew in my 20s when we was out in West London, we never had non-family members, apart from one person in our crew. We just kept it family. Because we just had to know that we had the trust, the absolute trust of everybody around us because of what we were involved in. When my mom prayed that prayer at the beginning of 1986, our whole crew got taken off the street the same day in different parts of West London with none of us knowing, and we all ended up in the same police station, all arrested differently with none of us aware that the other had been arrested. Until we're in the prison cell, police cell, and we're hearing somebody say, "Oi, Governor! Governor! Simon! Eddie! Hey, Uncle Eddie! Willie!" What? All of us are here. It was like, what happened? He happened. And she happened. And promises made and promises kept happened. And we never saw the street again for 2 years. And you know, it was in the midst of that year. I remember lying down in a prison cell. My brother and I shared a prison. We was on remand for a whole year waiting for our case to come up. I remember halfway through the first year, I said, Simon, is that boy? I said, I think God saved our life, you know. He said, no, don't think it. You better know God saved our life. Believe me, God saved all of our lives. And then he met me again. He met me again and just showed me his faithfulness in all of these spaces. And I gave my life to him. Gave my life back to him. In 1990, my friends who I mixed with in that group, that Revive and Stay Alive group, some were going into teaching, some was going into medicine, one was going into politics, but one was going into social work, but one by one, God pulled them all out and sent them all into ministry. And so I was coming into church when they were coming back from doing their first degree in Jamaica at Northern Caribbean University. And God just encouraged me and he said, yeah, this is now your direction. And that encouraged me. And a friend of mine, Gifford, who I'd known since I was 17, he said, Eddie, I'm going to pick you up and I'm going to bring you to church with me. I said, no. He said, I'm going to make an appeal today, Ed. I'm going to make an appeal today. And I want you to give your life to Jesus. He said, no. I said, if you're going to make an appeal, I'm going to give my life to Jesus. Make the appeal, I'm coming down, I'm ready. And we went to church, and he preached a sermon, "Who do men say I am?" And I answered that in my heart. Would you like to know what church I'm pulping? He made the appealing. Edmonton Seventh-day Adventist Church. The church that I closed my Bible in was the same church God opened the story back up again. Because he shows off like that. You know what I mean? He was like, "Yeah, how you like that? That was cool. That was cool. Say it." I was like, "No, yeah, that was cool. I'm actually, I want to give you your props, man." Yeah. I say to guys every time I go into prisons, pupil referral units, and spaces where guys struggle, you know, it doesn't matter when you start, what matters is that you start. And I've taken you long, so I'm just going to end and say this. I went back to community college at 25 to do my high school degrees. To do my high school exams and high school equivalents. Because it doesn't matter when you start, what matters is that you start. The Lord had changed my mind. I remember I was still struggling. I was addicted to weed for about 15 years. You know what I mean? The only break that I had was those couple of years in the church, and I went straight back into the addiction again. And I remember when I gave my life to Christ, I said, "Look, I've got this habit." I had given my life to Christ, but I said, "I've got this habit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit myself to just worshiping you every week. You've got to deal with these problems, but I'm coming with all of them. Because I can't fix it in order to bring myself. So I'm just going to bring myself because you fix my mind and my heart. And you got to fix my behavior." You know? Because I can't fix my behavior. But now that you've fixed hair and you've fixed hair, I'm just going to come and you do that. And so I came in with all of it. All of it. And I was baptized. There was a little group of us. And I became friends with a girl called Yvonne. We became best friends because her best friend liked me, and Yvonne liked my best friend. So we became best friends, trying to set each other up with our best friends. Make sense to you? Yeah. But I didn't like her best friend in that way, although we were all cool. And my best friend didn't like her in that way, although we were all cool. But we remained best friends. And then I was by her house one evening. All of us were in there. She was raised by her grandmother. And I was lying down on the couch, all of us there, just milling in the room. She came in from the dining room, never forget, came in from the dining room. And I looked at her, and she looked at me. And I looked at her, she looked at me. And I smiled, and she smiled. And we were dating. Because I'm cool like that. My game is strong. You need to understand, my game is strong. So she went upstairs and I played cool. Walked out the room. So I walked up to her and I said, "Really?" And she went, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then I went, "Really?" She was like, "Yeah." Then we were dating. We were dating. And I asked her father. And he was like, "Yeah, okay, you can date." And we dated for about 1.5 years. And then went and said to the father, "We love each other. We want to get married. And we want your blessing." And he was like, he was so fun. I said, "No, serious." No. And then he was like, "Hold on, you're serious?" I'm like, "No." Then he got really serious, like, "No." And then he threw me out the house. Threw me out. Real talk, he threw me out the house. Threw me out the house. He didn't understand. He said, "You're a good man. You read and you speak well, but you don't have no education. You don't have nothing you can offer my daughter." Because he had sent his daughter to private prep schools, grammar schools, and his daughter. When I met her, she was a manager already. Cardiac physiology, you know, she was on her 5th car and her 4th BMW with 5 cars.
Damn.
And I had Actually, I didn't have nothing. You know what I mean? You know, in England we say, I didn't have a pot to pee in or a window to throw it out. I didn't have nothing. But I was at a Hippolyte. And that was enough. And Jesus knew me. And that was enough. And she was mature enough and wise enough to know that God's changed his heart. His life is going to catch up with his heart. So at 25, I went back to do O-levels. We got married. I became a residential social worker. We got married in April of 93. August of 93, I went off. And it wasn't that I was uneducatable. I understood that they just wasn't giving me enough education. They wasn't challenging me deep enough so that I would settle, because I was just a restless kid. And I did my first degree, and I did that for my mum. And I did my first master's, and I did that for my mum. And then I did my second master's, and I did that for my mum as well. And so my wife and I were racing towards the PhD, and I'm doing that one for myself. We've got to keep something for yourself. Why am I telling you all of this? I'm telling you all of this because when God invades your life, and when God places himself in your life, he interrupts all your story. All your story. I'm just a boy from West London who God made a promise to. So I'm turning 50. I'm turning 50. And just before my birthday, I remember the Lord saying to me, Eddie, you see those promises I made to your mum? I made them to you too, you know. The promise wasn't just to be her husband. The promise was to be a husband to her for you. The promise was to be a father to you. The promise was to take away the reproach from your name. Because when God plants himself in the human story, he stays planted in the human story. When he plants himself in our story, he stays planted in our story. And if we choose for him to be there, he will never allow himself to be uprooted from our story. Father, thank you. Thank you that you see us and you know us. You know us and you love us. You love us and you choose us. You choose us and you transform us. You transform us and you send us. You send us. And then we are so surprised by what people are able to read of you in our lives. So I'm asking that everyone here tonight, Father, have that sense that you are with them. You know them. You know their story. You are planted deep in their hearts and in their story. Pray, Father, that they will know your love for them. Know your desire for them. Be encouraged that your love for them is deep and it's great and it knows no bounds. We praise you, we bless you, and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Can we all stand up and sing our last song? It's How Deep the Father's Love for Us.
How great the pain of sin. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished.
Please take a seat, everyone.
Announcements. Tomorrow's 7:30. Hello. Let's just wrap it up. We just have a couple announcements. Okay. I just have a couple announcements. Tomorrow is Friday. It's a rest day. It's a day to get prepared for Sabbath. So tomorrow's service starts at 7:30. And the good thing is the Makai people are actually coming down. So you guys make sure you come and then just and cans, yeah. And just come along and welcome them and just feel them. Make them feel welcome. And for Saturday, I've been told to make an announcement. If you guys want to make something that we can share for lunch on Saturday, it would be really lovely because the ladies always bring food, so let's just try and help them out for one Saturday at least. Because we have visitors coming over, so yeah, just make something. And the cafe is open. Pastor's book is still available.
Yeah, boys, make sure you iron your shirts for Saturday. I want you to look good on Saturday, so just
That's not a part of it. Anyway, if you guys are staying, there's snacks, there's drinks, there's lovely people, there's God within us. Just have a good chill afternoon. And thank you for coming in, guys. We appreciate you. God bless.